Hello and welcome. This is the Defining Ownership in Tokenized Assets session. I want to thank the Vancouver Biennale for inviting all of us, and especially myself. It's always exciting to meet with new people. I'm glad to have this particular group because everyone has something unique to offer this space, and in particular this discussion. So I'm looking forward to this. I've asked everyone to introduce themselves briefly and say two things about themselves. First is why they enjoy what they do, and the other is their favorite movie. So I'm going to ask Carolyn first. Say a little bit about yourself, why you like what you do, and your favorite movie.
Sure. Hi, I'm so excited to be here. I'm Carolyn. I'm the co-founder of Mintbase. We are like the Shopify for NFTs. So we allow people to create and sell NFTs as tickets, music, art, membership. Basically, people figure out themselves what NFTs shall be. I'm super excited about building Mintbase because it allows people to actually own a digital asset, trade the digital asset, and it empowers people to create their own business models. And my favorite movie, it's actually a series. It's called Startup. I highly recommend it for anyone to watch. It's about this blockchain startup and all the hurdles they're facing with like regulatory affairs and legal things and fighting against injustice and removing middlemen. And it's very exciting.
So not Silicon Valley.
No, it's
Okay.
like a similar one, but different. Yeah.
All right, or
Yeah.
Mr. Robot. Okay, Michael Sanders. Say, introduce yourself.
Hey, thanks, Cynthia. So our company's Horizon Blockchain Games, and we're building a new dimension where internet economies are fun, accessible, and for the benefit of all participants. And we're making a video game called Skyweaver where you can play for free and win these tradable items. And we're also building blockchain infrastructure called Sequence that enables these types of experiences and provides a seamless user and developer experience for Ethereum. And I love what we do. I'm really inspired about allowing players and users to own the economies they participate in and contribute to. And my favorite movies, I have three of them: Avatar, Inception, and Interstellar.
All right, awesome. Devin, say why you love what you do, your favorite movies.
Hey everyone, thanks Cynthia. My name is Devin Finzer. I'm one of the co-founders of OpenSea. We're a marketplace for non-fungible tokens. One of the many reasons I love what I do is just being in a really experimental space is a lot of fun because you never really know what's going to happen. Like one day you might be, seeing new DeFi projects launch on your site. The other day you might be looking at things like art or just lots of really interesting, weird stuff that's, I think, very unique relative to other areas of tech that are a little more mature than the non-fungible token space. So that's one thing I really like. My favorite movie is Good Will Hunting.
Awesome. And Nate, say something about yourself, why you love what you do, and your favorite movie.
Cool. Well, thanks for having me. Happy to be here. One of the co-founders at Async Art, and we are essentially a place to mint art, crypto art, but we take it a step further where we call it programmable art, which sounds techie, but all it really is giving artists the ability to create one singular artwork that kind of changes over time and is influenced by its owners. Owners can own not only the entire piece, but they can own sections of the piece that add up to the whole. And they have abilities that are imbued in those pieces that owners can play with. So you have basically an ever evolving singular piece of art. So kind of trying to take art to what is the next stage within kind of like, what does it mean to be a digital piece of art and what can it do? So yeah, I mean, for me, I agree with Devin. Like, I just like being in a space where we're really still trying to figure out like what the standards are. I find that like the most fun place to be. For me, I feel comfortable there. And also like a year or two back, I've spent all my free time learning about this space, and now I get to actually work in this space and help kind of define those standards. So to me, that's just super fun. And then movies, I probably should hang out with Michael because I feel like we have the same likes. But I really love Inception. I like Eternal Sunshine, Spotless Mind, and Matrix was kind of like my all-time for a while. So.
Yeah, those are evergreen movies. So Carolyn, I'll start with you in understanding what it is that MintBase does. I understand that you are in business and development and marketing for the organization. It was described as a financial services company, and I also found out that you, at an artist, let's say, can mint and sell on your website. And a couple of things I wanted to just, be complimentary about with regard to what I investigate. I'll say just a few things about myself. So I'm an attorney by profession. I teach engineers in engineering school at GW. And I've been working in the space in some way, shape, or form since the end of 2016. And my clients tend to be developers, small businesses, and artists. So I'm a volunteer attorney for an arts organization here in DC. And my first clients were actually a musician and a software developer who was working on a children's software. So there are lots of things that I am interested in particular about this space, but for what I want to talk about here is dealing with the idea of ownership. And while being an attorney, I have my own way of thinking about what ownership is. I'm hoping to get some feeling from you all about what you consider to be elements of ownership, so that we're all talking on the same page. So, Carolyn, I really liked the frequently asked questions part of the website. I liked the sincerity in the answers, and I thought it was responsive to a lot of questions that I would have had just coming onto the site. So I appreciated that. I appreciated the honesty with regard to things may not go as smoothly as you might expect. I appreciated that because that's just true in most all circumstances. So I just wanted to mention that. And with regard to what the service that you all provide, because you are setting up, like you said, a Shopify for NFTs, as well as for tickets, as I understand. One thing that I've noticed over the past several years is how do artists market themselves. And if you're setting up any kind of storefront, you're thinking about setting up, your storefront, your marketplace, and understanding what it means when somebody buys what you sell, and your obligations and how you can make sure that the buyer, as you as the seller, are actually making available what you said you're making available. So there's kind of a couple of components. First, if you have your own storefront, then you're responsible for what's on it. But you're hosting it, and you're asking people to use your services to mint. But how can artists do a better job? Because I'm still not sure that artists understand what is happening with NFTs. And if you're setting up a storefront, it sounds really great, but this is not Amazon where you can set up your own storefront. So how can artists who are interested in setting up a storefront on any platform better market themselves and make sure that they are giving customers what they want in terms of ownership and possession?
Sure. So there are many different elements to your question. One is identity, one is marketing, business development, and you also said that artists don't understand what NFTs are. Essentially, no one understands. So we all are trying to figure it out. I think what we really what's really great about this field is that we are all experimenting, and we know the benefits of actually owning something. If you think about, for example, shares of stock, like who owns the shares of stock if I buy some Coca-Cola shares? It's not me, it's the broker dealer, then it's the clearing firm. But with NFTs, you can actually see, okay, I'm Carolyn, I own this piece of art. It's trackable on the blockchain and I really own it. And if I want, I can gift it to my friends. So that's really exciting. The second part of your question, like how to support artists more in terms of like marketing themselves and those kind of things. So because we are all new to this field and we are figuring it out, we are kind of experimenting with different things. So we have a headquarter in crypto voxels, which is like a VR world, and I think ThinkArt and OpenSea also have their places there, and Decentraland. So we help artists who are creating art on our platform or selling tickets to exhibit their art in our headquarters. And we have several groups and guilds, they are called guilds, where we actually support artists on a monthly basis, so they can apply for help. For example, if they need our space to do virtual exhibitions, if they need more funding for their project. So we are trying to figure it out together, because what really is great about this is that everyone like in the guilds, in the groups, have so many ideas. Like it's just flourishing of creativity. And we have this Create Base guild on Telegram, and people can just come in, they can say what they need, they can apply for funding, and we try to support them wherever we can. So that's one approach.
Okay. So I'm going to probably have a wrap up question for all of you about what ownership means to you, because I just want to have some clarity about what you intend in terms of ownership, because using something is different from owning something. And those are different things. You either have a license to do something, you have permission to do something, or you can do whatever you want with something. And those are different things. So Michael, I understand that you're a chief storyteller, which is cool. I like that, you know, the co-founder nature of what you're doing. I like the investor advisor aspect of the work that you do. There were a couple things that I thought were kind of cool. This cross-platform, free to play, give, own, take, you know, gift your cards. It reminded me, because when I first started getting interested in this was Spells of Genesis and the Counterparty platform. Have you been on Counterparty back in the day?
No, I've heard of Spells of Genesis, but yeah, I haven't experienced it myself.
Yeah, it just has a reminiscent feel, because that was part of what they were doing is trading cards, and that was one of my first, you know, introductions to it is looking at that, and I actually liked the art, and I liked the idea of trading cards because it just is childhood memories. I also had met briefly Philippe in San Francisco a couple years ago, and he was on a gaming panel, and this was before, at least in my opinion, this was very early on in figuring out how NFTs were going to be used in games, because the discussion was about, well, how do we, you know, have cross-platform games, and how do we make sure that there's consistency within the tokens and all that sort of thing. So that was cool. So for gaming platforms, my question is, depending on the token, you know, whether or not you have ERC 721 out in other worlds besides art, is the ERC 20. Should artists design their works around being on a gaming platform or strictly art? Because that was one of the things I found different, because I think if you're designing your art to be on a gaming platform is a little bit different than trading just an art card. And the attributes that you can design into it as part of your token functionality will be a little bit different. But I was just wondering if because the functionality goes into, you know, if you are taking on different attributes in different games, the ownership kind of changes because there are new attributes that could increase the value of the token potentially. But as artists think about, well, should I get into gaming? Should I, and thinking, with your experience and then with this platform itself, what should artists think about? And on the flip side of that, if you're a collector, what should you think about as a collector? Because you might have a completely different approach if you just are used to collecting static or maybe moving art pieces versus a gaming piece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really interesting consideration, Cynthia. And for us, in Skyweaver, the game, as you mentioned, it's a trading card game, which we think is really cool because most online card games do not allow trading. And with respect to the artists, we pay artists to create original artwork for our cards. In Skyweaver, the launch set includes 500 unique cards, whether they're spells or units or enchantments. And we own the rights to then use that artwork and sell it on the cards. And then the cards, of course, have different mechanics. For anyone watching, in a nutshell, you could compare it to something like Hearthstone or Magic the Gathering or Pokemon in terms of different cards with different attributes. And so, yeah, we pay for all of the art to be created. And then players can win these cards through free-to-play gameplay. By ranking highly on the competitive leaderboards, they'll be rewarded with what are called silver cards, so tradable blockchain cards. And then there are other game modes that you can enter into called Conquest, where if you lose your first match, you're out. But if you win a match, you win another silver card. And if you win 2 matches, you win 2 silver cards. And if you win 3 matches, you win a silver and a rare trophy gold card. So what's interesting about this is that all of the cards are in fact generated by players through gameplay. And at this stage, we don't have, an outsider can't just create a card and put it into the game because that would impact the game balance. And a lot of consideration needs to go into how, like for the gameplay, right? Because it is a video game. That said, in the future, we could do community-oriented contests or have community contributors who are creating unique artwork, and then it enters into the game, and depending on how it trades, they could earn some portion of the revenue that's generated from it. But just to be clear, like even our company Horizon, we're not selling any cards. They're all generated through gameplay. We'll make revenue through entries into Conquest, but yeah, we're not actually selling the cards ourselves. And and we have a peer-to-peer marketplace in the game, also a wallet that we've built super user-friendly so that players can trade and buy and sell with one another right in the user interface. And of course, they could take their item and go somewhere like OpenSea and trade there, which it really helps with discovery. And it helps both parties, OpenSea and Skyweaver, in this decentralized ecosystem.
So it's in-game. If you want to play the game, you have to stay there, essentially, on your...
Yeah, the game is browser-based, so you can play it anywhere for free. But to use the cards in the game, yeah, you'll be playing inside of the game at skyweaver.net, but you also own those cards as artworks. So like you could think of your card as like a mini poster, or it's like owning a physical card similar to Magic the Gathering, and then you could go trade that with your friends, whether it's online or you just meet up in person and exchange it through your wallet.
Okay, so it's similar to how CryptoKitties worked. They hired an artist to create the original design, and so the artists gave you guys the copyright, essentially. Exactly. And then the licensing, you basically are giving people permission to use the cards in a defined way. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that, because that's how CryptoKitties set their system up. It's everything that is licensed. The design themselves are licensed, and people are allowed to use it because of the license agreement. All right, great. So that makes sense. It's there are definitely some similarities, and I do look forward. am really looking forward to any sort of cross-platform gaming, because that was one thing that was interesting about Counterparty's ability to do that. I think ERC tokens 721s, I think, are set up to do something like that. So maybe that's something to do in the future, because you want to be able to share some of the metadata, and that might be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thanks. Devin, so you're next. You're the person I'm more familiar with just because you've been around longer, but I haven't ever met you. So so thanks very much for participating in this today. All right, so the OpenSea, ERC 721 standard. You have a peer-to-peer marketplace for blockchain-based assets. And so I had a couple of questions, but I'm going to, one of them I think people would be interested in is because you have some gaming tokens also. There's some element of that for OpenSea, right? So it doesn't, you're an agnostic platform. It does, in some ways, you'll work with just about any token that is offered to be sold. Is that true? Am I stating that correctly?
Yep, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. So what I want to ask you then is, because there's such a broad range of things that you offer on the site, and it's got to be, in some respects, overwhelming to manage all of these different things. And I understand that it's up to the artist to make sure that whatever they put up on your site, they have the rights to do that, that they are telling you that they have the rights to those things that they're posting and making available for sale. And what I want to ask about that is, on the flip side of that, from artists and a collector's perspective, whether or not, what should collectors and artists do that might make your life easier? Because you have these terms and conditions that I've seen, and because this is pretty consistent across all of these things, because I've also seen the Twitter arguments about, well, this is, made available, and why is my art here and there? Is there something that you would like artists and collectors to know? And to what extent do you think that OpenSea should be responsible for what other people are putting on your site? Because it is different from a internet service provider. This is not Facebook. It's very different from that. So you don't have that carve out. But what do you think people should know who are collectors and artists when they're, not just your site, but any site who does a similar thing? But since you've been out there for longer and you have an agnostic flavor, what things do you think would be helpful?
Totally. Yeah. It's a great question. So I would say, I guess, to take a little bit of a step back, just to sort of explain OpenSea's role in relation to the assets that live on the blockchain. I think one way to think about it is you have all of these assets out there, and then you have a layer above that, the websites that let users interface with these assets. So you can go and create a website like OpenSea that could only maybe display game items or only display art from one particular smart contract. OpenSea, on the other hand, has taken a very broad approach. So we display almost all assets, and we do some curation, but it's primarily just to filter out assets that are clearly fraudulent or clearly illegal or clearly bad, right? Or clearly things that users wouldn't want to see. So we do some basic curation. In terms of what's very helpful from both artists and collectors, on the collector side, we have some tools that make it easier to surface content that is fraudulent. So we have a button that allows you to flag an asset and say, for whatever reason, this is trying to market itself as the original Josie piece, but really what it is it's just a new smart contract that someone made and uploaded that same image and pretended to be the original. So we have some tools that, we're very reliant on our community now to go, and when they see stuff like that, report it to us, and it's relatively easy to do now. On the artist side, I think, it's so experimental. Like I don't know if I would have a single recommendation for an artist other than to try a lot of things and kind of figure out what works for you. And I think there is this challenge that we're all dealing with as a space around how to standardize more of this. So to your sort of early comment, Cynthia, one thing you mentioned was, well, isn't it kind of a hassle to have to support all of these different contracts across the entire blockchain. And in some ways it is, and in some ways it isn't. So the ways in which it isn't is everything conforms to a couple of standards. So everything's either ERC 721, 1155, or ERC 20. And that alone is extremely exciting, because if you think about the space of existing digital assets, you would have database XYZ hosted by Epic Games, I don't know, some Pinterest's website data servers. Like, to go and support everything would just be, it's impossible, right? And so it wasn't ever done before. So on one hand, you have the standardization, but then on the other hand, there's still a lot of areas where there isn't standardization, and it's just very nascent. So things like composable NFTs, there's emerging standards, but they're not really super well adopted yet. Things like royalties, there's emerging standards again, but it takes a while for all the different websites, including ourselves, to like catch up to these things. You know, like metadata is still like kind of standardized, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. So maybe my recommendation for builders in the space is like, you know, help contribute to those standards, and you know, conform as much as possible to the open standards, so that you can be available across a variety of platforms, and everything at least works a little bit better together. So
great. Thanks very much.
Sure.
Good answer. All right, Nate. Now it's very interesting. I was not familiar very much with async art, but I was familiar with Robert Alice's Block 21. I thought it was your co-founder, your chief creative officer, and it presents this idea of programmable art, which of course I think all of this is. So perhaps you can explain that a little bit more. The Block 21 was a conceptual art project based on Portraits of a Mind, and it reminded me of Eve Sussman's work, 89 Seconds, in the sense that there were different atoms that could potentially come together, and different art was generated because different atoms could potentially come together, and you see something different. Yours is this particular thing is a lot more complicated, I think. The layer concept adds a level of complication. It's almost like a watch, that an old school, you know, pocket watch that has so many different levels to it, and they are coordinated together. So one thing that I was trying to figure out, although I tried to read things, is how is ownership worked out for each layer? Because we were talking about, there was in the explanation, we were talking about shards, which I think is different from what you're doing. I don't think shards is the equivalent of this layer approach. And what I understand is that the artist agrees to permit works to be modified in these ways, on these layers, in the form of layers, and then that's somehow or another works with the base layer, which would be the original artist's work. And then the layers are, I don't know if they're owned separately, or if they're or if it becomes part of the work. So, and I wish I had more time to articulate what I think it is.
I think I know what you're saying. Yeah.
But maybe just do a little explanation of how this works from you know, what's the business case on this?
Sure. Yeah, no, those are good, like, clarifying questions, because when someone hears an interchangeable moving piece of art, you automatically think this is super complicated. It probably doesn't fit any of the standards that Devin mentioned. You're trying to do something really crazy, but from foundationally, all of the elements that come together with async, like we're basically building on the shoulders of giants here. We're taking what Ethereum already does, and it's programmable. It enforces ownership, all those things, and we're just taking it and making a product with what Ethereum does strongest, in my opinion. And to the point of ownership, and that's why I liked the idea of this panel, is I think we all, and I'm going to get to how it works, like you're asking, but ERC 721s, or owning digital assets, is really powerful when you look under the hood at how it works, if you take the time to do that. But not everyone has time to do that. So what I'm excited about with Async and other products that really showcase the power of your ownership by using it, or by kind of like using the powers that you have by owning part of it. And so in this case, like, the product itself proves why ownership is powerful and why you as the only person that can do something is powerful. So with Async, you mentioned, okay, so there's the master image, which is basically the Bible. It's the thing that represents, the current state of all the layers of where they're at and what selection they're on. If you want to think about async artwork, it's like a sandbox that the artist designs for all the owners to play within. So when they mint the piece, the parameters of which it can change is all kind of set in stone. It's locked. So if I buy a layer of a piece, I can't just put my name on it. In its simplest form, you think of an artist and they're going to make a forest and a sky behind it. They can, instead of just minting that full image, they can mint a few different types of skies that they designed and a few different forests in the foreground. And the potential to switch to any of those forests or skies are imbued with inside that artwork. And if I bought the sky layer, I am the only one that can decide which version of that sky is showing at any time. And we use Ethereum's strongest point, which is to prove ownership, to decide if I want to change. So if I say I want to change the sky to an orange sky the artist provided, Ethereum checks that I'm the owner. And then if it is, it automatically reflects that new sky on the master image, which is the overall artwork. So we are using what Ethereum does in a smart way under the hood to basically allow an artist to create one single piece of artwork with potentially different looks all kind of wrapped up into it with some parameters. And we do it in a way that's not, as from an artist standpoint, all they're doing is it's like providing us a Photoshop file with different layers and saying, I want to turn this one on and turn this one off. Like, these are the things that people can play with and let people play with it. So there's no, there's no coding on their end. Or they can say, I want it to switch from this to this when it's nighttime or daytime. And now all of a sudden you have a piece of artwork like the one behind you that could be hanging on the wall. And if it's nighttime, it's showing one state. And if it's daytime, it's showing a different state. And yet it's all still one single piece of art. And I think it's pretty revolutionary for an artist to think in that way. So it's just a new medium for artists to think within.
So potentially the person who creates a layer, it's not even derived from the original artist's work. It's just intended to work with that artist's work.
So when a piece of art is minted, they mint the master artwork and all the layers that go with it all in one go, all at once. No layers can be appended later. The master holds the instructions for every layer to look at and what order they go in. And so when I mint a piece of art, I have to mint all of that together, the layers and all, and people can come and buy it. But no one can just mint a layer and throw it on an artwork. An artwork has all its layers. It's like we're kind of like opening up a piece of art and then letting you purchase layers of it. But yeah, it's all defined by the artist when they mint it.
Yeah, it's interesting because from, there in law with regard to property ownership, there's joint ownership and then there's common ownership. And there are different rules related to those things. If you want to keep the piece of land, having everybody have an interest in the land is very different than people being able to sell their own percentage of that land. So I was trying to think of, well, how does this work from that perspective? Do we co-own the thing? In which case, if nobody can sell outside of this parameter, and can't do anything, can't get debt on it, because that's the other thing. You don't want to get a loan on something that suddenly you are owning, you're dealing with debt or a loan, versus somebody having a divisible interest that if they want to get debt on their divisible interest, who cares about them, right? I don't want debt on my stuff, right?
You have full control of your, there are some pieces where people basically made it like you buy pieces of land on this image. And if you own that piece, you solely own it. Even the artist can't take it back. Of course, we know that's how these work. But yeah, you can sell it or resell it or change it, and it is yours. But they all are connected in one overall piece, and yet each piece is its own and owned by. I like to think of it as like we say, like a visual DAO almost too. It's like the main master image represents the choosings of all the community within that piece, and they all can have their own say and can sell and buy their pieces.
Yeah, all of these things that yours seems to be would require the more sophisticated person to get what it is that you're doing. All of these things require some sophistication on the part of the artist as well as the collector, and that's one thing that you all can hopefully come up with a method of educating people about how this works in a way that's kind of not risky, that people can learn about this in a not because as an attorney I'm primarily risk averse. I don't like anybody to be caught in something that they didn't understand, right? But I think these are all they are stretching the legal understandings of things. They are certainly extending some of the legal understandings of things and having agreements that give people particular rights. And it sounds like what you're talking about with ownership is not ownership in the sense that if you're not owning the artist's work, that you can't do whatever you want with artist's work. You're meaning ownership in the sense that you own a license to do certain things with the artist's work. So I think that and if I'm not correct, please correct me if I'm misstating that, because it seems what I'm hearing is ownership. You own the token in the sense that you don't own the underlying code. You don't own anything with regard to that. You don't own the smart contract, but there's the token and there's the art, and the art still maintains whatever the copyright is. You own a license to do certain things, including some functionality, including making derivative works, including making modifications, and that depends on what the agreement is with the artist, or as well as the company, that and to the extent that there's been a commission. The commission is determining how the rights are done. Okay, so I'm out of time. This is really, really great. Those of you who have slides, please make them available to the group, because I'm sure people will be very excited to learn more about what you all do. This was great. I learned a lot, and that's why I like doing these things. so I appreciate your time. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Oh,
thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Have a good one.
Bye.
bye-bye.
Thank you.